So today with the Stronger Scars podcast, we have an amazing guest. Anyone who knows anything about the soccer world is going to know Tim Howard. He's been everywhere from the English Premier League to the US men's national team, probably one of the best known goalkeepers in the world. So with that being said, Tim, you kind of just want to, give a first little introduction about yourself before we get started?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. This is pretty cool. It's a special opportunity. So I've played soccer my whole life. That's what people know me for. I started out in New Jersey as a young kid and young professional, and I got seen by Manchester United, which is the mightiest club in the world at the time, and went abroad at 23, jumped right in and started playing with the national team as well, and had a pretty cool career going from Manchester United to Everton Football Club, and then on to playing 3 World Cups with the US men's national team. So a lot of really cool memories through the game of soccer. And I always say every good thing in my life I can trace back to the game of soccer. So I'm very thankful. And I appreciate you having me on today.
Of course. So as my Stronger Scars listeners know, we like to talk injury.
Mm-hmm.
So first, can you just kind of talk about what injuries you've had in the past?
So I've been very fortunate and thankful that I haven't had a ton. When people ask me about my career and what's most special to me, it's the longevity that I've had and the ability to play in so many games and so often. I've had to play through a bunch of injuries too, right? And so I think that resilience was important to me. The 2 major injuries that I've had in my career were, one, I broke my back, 2 non-weight bearing bones in a game in 2012. And I went up for a ball, got undercut, landed on my back, and something was wrong. I knew something was wrong. It was so painful. And eventually, after a series of tests, it revealed that there were two broken bones. And again, thankfully, non-weight bearing, and it put me out for probably about 6 weeks. But that was the first time I had really suffered with anything in 2012. And then in 2016, at such a critical juncture of my career, I was towards the end. So I was older. I was 36, and I tore my adductor off the groin. Tore my adductor off the pubic bone, and so that was a major, possibly career ending at my age. Had a brilliant surgeon who performed a pretty revolutionary surgery at the time, and got me back in 4 months instead of 6. And so I know people deal with longer layoffs, but for me that was 4 to 6 months. I had never heard of such a thing, and at the end as well. So I'm thankful I was able to come back stronger from that.
So what is it like, because I feel like some of us can't even picture this in our minds, what is it like getting hurt in a game with millions of people watching?
Yeah, interestingly enough, that kind of goes out the window. When you're suffering from pain, you're just waiting for your endorphins to kick in and hoping nothing's terribly wrong. Everyone else is, all the booing and jeering to tell you to get off, stop faking. That all goes by the wayside. You're just hoping to hear the voice of the physio coming on the field. So, it's tough. It's tough. You're hoping nothing's seriously wrong. But the fans really at that point, you kind of block that out and you're hoping for the best.
And then I guess along with that, what's the rehab process like at such a top level? I'm sure you guys have the best of the best, and just how do you think, along with the resources you have, I'm sure your motivation's probably so much higher. You have a lot, it's a contract. It's not just you're playing college soccer, there's a lot of things behind the scenes going on. So how do you kind of think the perspective of that rehab process is like?
Well, I think that we all have, college athletes and professional athletes all have challenges, right? Challenges that are, your priorities in college are super important. And then your priorities as a professional athlete are also super important. You can't diminish any of those. I think the difference with a professional athlete, as you touched on, is once you get injured as a professional athlete, your entire job is then not to perform. Your entire job is to throw everything humanly possible into your rehab. You don't have to worry about school. You don't have to worry about other outside. You do, but your one job when you wake up in the morning is how hard can I attack this rehab? How often can I rehab today? What am I putting my body from? How much water am I drinking, and how hydrated am I? what am I intaking in terms of food and diet, because I'm not as active, so I still need to be slim and toned and muscular, and what am I putting? So it's you're attacking your rehab the same as you're attacking preparing for a game. You're not preparing for the game. The game is actually, the winning side of the game is actually getting back on the field. And so it's I say it's easier. It's not easier. It's the scope of attention is much tighter for a professional athlete. You don't have to worry about class load. You don't have to worry about all the things that go into being a college athlete. And so it doesn't make it easier or more difficult. It just makes it different. And I think you see that. And you also touched on the technology that and money that's afforded to sports science in the professional realm is mind-blowing. It's actually fascinating. It's something that I really try to study for our own players, because I think it's massively important.
Awesome. Yeah. I guess I never really thought about that. It seems like it would be a lot more high stress, just because like you guys are at the top level and it's like
Sure.
all eyes are on you, when are you coming back,
Yeah. Well, I think, and also in regards to that, I think that there is, and depending on which league you're in and how your contract's structured, there's some guys who that is a massively high motivating factor for them, is the fact that, maybe they're in the back end of their contract and they need to get healthy and prove they can get back on the field or the court in order to perform and earn another contract, because that's their livelihood. So yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Tim, just to follow up on just the pressures of rehab, I think an interesting area to focus is maybe the World Cups. I mean, did you see players maybe as they were preparing for World Cups feel more pressure? Because I think that's the ultimate pressure for when I hear people talk about that opportunity. As they got close to making the team, did you see guys that maybe were trying to force their way through injuries or felt that pressure to play through injuries to
Sure.
make that team, or because that's the ultimate, right? And it's kind of beyond even that professional realm. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't touch on it. That's actually a really good point. I think that, with the World Cup, it's the ultimate goal for any soccer player. It's the greatest achievement you can have. Getting named to a World Cup team and then playing in the World Cup. And then what I think you'll see is, guys playing through injury for sure. Guys even disclosing some injuries sometimes because they're like, I got to make this team. I got to get on the team. So if my hamstring's not where it's supposed to be, I'm not telling too many people behind the scenes, because I need to be fit and ready. But yeah, I think you look at time frame, because once you miss that, some people miss their window of opportunity because it doesn't come around for another 4 years. So I think you see a lot of athletes who might be dealing with injuries, trying to get them right and trying to be incredibly diligent with how they're rehabbing, because they can't miss the opportunity.
So I think one of the biggest things that helped me through my injuries in college was just having like a camaraderie around like the injury process and, having people in the training room with me. So I'm just kind of curious what that looks like at such a high level. Like, were there players who were injured at the same time as you that you kind of bonded over with, or is it more of like a personal experience for you guys at that level? I don't know. I'm just interested to see like what that's like.
I'm very much an internalizer. So I'm the guy who I hate being with other injured athletes. I hate being on the training table. I never really, and again, I try to stay out of the physio room as much as possible. So when I was rehabbing all that time, it was very much, I'd have the physio who I felt closest to, who understood my needs. And, I dogged him every day. What can I do? I need to do more. Let's keep going. Like, why is this happening? Why am I feeling this? When's this going to get better? And I was relentless with my questions and my pursuit of trying to get back. And so, yeah, I didn't want to use anything else as a crutch. I didn't want to use anybody else or anyone else's situation. I very much focused internally in trying to get right with my own self.
Okay, so on the flip side of injuries, I am a huge advocate for mental health. So I'm just kind of wondering, because I know mental health has kind of taken a turn the past couple of years. It's definitely more of a conversation now. But what's the right word here? Like, what's the relationship with mental health at the top level?
Well, I think thankfully it's getting so much better and so much more open, and resources are getting pushed towards that. Resources are important. More than anything, the understanding and compassion is where I think we needed to grow, and I think we have. When you look at some of the top athletes coming out, and talking about their struggles with mental health. And and sometimes it is very far to one end of the spectrum. And other times it's just people talking about how difficult a moment they might have had after a particular loss. And so it runs the scope. And I think that talking about it has been revolutionary for mental health. I agree with you. And it seems like it's only been really short lived. It feels like it's only been for the last 3 to 5 years, if that, that people are really coming out and starting to talk about what that looks like and feels like. And it's been accepted. I think more than anything, for so long in sports, we have done ourselves a disservice. We didn't give them a safe platform to talk about mental health and how they were feeling. We told them to, particularly on the men's side again, be a man, stand up, don't put that to the side. That's all garbage. And like we realize what a disservice we've done to our human beings, our athletes.
Hey, Tim, just to follow up on that, I think it's a really interesting point, to lead with understanding and compassion. How do you build that within a team? Because I know, like, even you just said, when you were injured, you personally want to internalize things. Mm-hmm. Others might want to be more outward facing with their emotions. And as you said, teams over the course of history maybe have been less inclined to facilitate those kind of discussions. But as you said, it's a topic that's growing, that people want to talk about more, but I know there's still resistance to maybe bring that into the locker room. It's like, hey, that's a health issue. Keep it on the health side. So how do you, as you look at teams, other teams you've been on or teams that you're, look out around the landscape, how can you build that culture in a team so that those discussions are able to be had, even though everybody kind of has a different way they might want to go about it?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. It's a tough one. I think you have to build a team holistically. I think you have to build a team based on love. And that's why I believe that winning in pro sports, in any sport, but winning in team sports is one of the most impossible things to do, is because to get everybody pulling in the same direction, to get everybody to have understanding and whether it be times of tough love or compassion or whatever it is. And so to now the scope of that question, I think you have to have this holistic approach to team building, allowing guys to, yes, we all need to fall in line. Men and women, you need to fall in line and you need to do what's asked of you as a team. But hey, you know what? If this guy needs to go home because he needs to see his parents because he's homesick or something, hey, maybe he's allowed to do that, and I think within the team scope, you need to be able to give guys a little bit longer of a leash and a little bit more freedom to express themselves. That doesn't mean they don't show up to training. That doesn't mean they don't work hard. It doesn't mean they don't buy into the team concepts. It just means we're all different. It used to be like, no, we file and rank and everyone's the same and you just treat people the same. You can't. And we come from different backgrounds and we come from different socioeconomic backgrounds and we all have different shared experiences that we have to be compassionate towards. And so I think when, with teams that I've been on or that I'm trying to build, it's just that, like, I want the utmost discipline. At the same time, I think every individual person has to be treated differently. And if they have an issue or a gripe or something that needs to be aired in terms of a grievance, you need to give them a space to do that and not feel like they're going to be chastised for it. Right. And mental health, it falls into that bucket big time.
Yeah, just to add off that, I think it's also, very important. Like, my experience with mental health has been solely based around my injuries, but I think it's also, each person needs to believe that, like you said, everyone's different. And I think that, a big part for me was realizing that my teammates who are healthy and playing are also going through things with their mental health. And I think a huge part of it is just having self-awareness and realizing that we're all going through different things. And sometimes, you have to I don't want to say not have a pity party for yourself, but you do have to just understand that everyone is having a different experience, whatever level you're at, and just be, passionate and compassionate with them about it.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a good point. I think that we all want to be relevant. I think every human being wants to be relevant, and on a team, it's magnified. And what I mean by that is, when you get injured, our worth, our self-worth is it's what can I do for the team? It's always been, how can I save the ball? If I can't save the ball for the team, how am I helping the team? Like, that's how we all think. And then when we're injured, unfortunately, that gets magnified. Like, I'm not helping the team, and so inside I just feel a little deflated, right? And I think when it comes to the team aspect of things, that's where I think the integration of having everybody, whether it be athletes who are injured, but they still travel, or athletes who are there on game day to be in team meetings, utilizing the leadership of certain athletes to be a part of, be a part of the whole team concept, so that that particular athlete feels like they still have a belonging, still have a purpose.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the hardest things about injuries. Like, you feel so lost on your team. And like one of the hardest things for myself and some of my teammates have been like, one of the hardest things about injury is like that game and practice experience for the injured athletes, because I feel like sometimes it's handled in a way that makes them feel that irrelevance. And, instead of zoning in on what everyone else is doing in practice and watching the drills, it's sometimes shagging balls and doing things like that. And it kind of can just be demoralizing. And I think you brought up a good point, like traveling, staying connected in those team meetings. Like, just because you're going through a rehab process doesn't mean you should be completely sidelined. It means you should be, if anything, more invested in what everyone else is doing.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's a really interesting point. Okay, so what was it like to be on the best teams in the world in general? No injury, just like, I just want to know what that experience was like.
I'm a lucky boy. I played in some really cool stadiums, played for some awesome coaches, and I played with some of the greatest players in the world. And, I think some of it, until you actually belong and you prove your worth, I think, speaking of worth, until you prove your worth, you're having to fake it. You're having to, you're on the field with these world-class players and I belong here. And in the back of your mind, you're like, holy cow, like, what am I doing here? So, I faked it a lot, until I made enough saves, played enough good games where, I felt like, okay, I can walk a room now and people will respect me. But until that point, it was pretty daunting for sure.
So I think one of the big things that we talked about in our team meeting with you was confidence. How do you build that confidence, and then how do you keep it for such a long time?
Confidence is a day-by-day thing. When I was on with your team, we talked about confidence versus self-belief and what the difference is. As an athlete, I never lost that belief in my own abilities. There were some times where I didn't play very well, and there was times where I was thinking, I got to get better here. There's one aspect of my game that isn't great, so I need to get better. But at the same time, I still believe that I could get better. I still believe that I belonged. I still believe that I could succeed and play well. But the confidence aspect is that's a daily thing. There were times where I'd come home from practice and go, you weren't very good today. Confidence is a little bit shaken, a little bit low. But experience helps with that. Staying the course, keeping your head down and staying focused on performances and trusting in your training. Eventually, you get to a point where you can have a bad day and your confidence doesn't drop. You're like, all right, it was a bad day. But I've proven in my past that I've had bad days and bad weeks, and yet I still come back and performed at an epically high level. And so that, experience is what you need. And until you get experience, which we know is difficult, you have to always continue to ride the wave of confidence. Because I think understanding it is also helpful. I think when you have a low ebb in confidence and you don't understand, you're like, why can't I play well? I haven't played well in 2 weeks or something like that. You don't really understand it. It's about accepting the fact that there's just going to be bad days and there's going to be very good days. And I think I had a coach one time tell me when I was younger, you make a mistake, act like you've been there before. You make a great save, act like you've been there before. And all that told me was just be the same person always. Stay steady.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think especially, I feel like some people who aren't really in touch with the soccer world don't understand like how big of a deal soccer is over in the English Premier League. And I can only imagine the pressure. Those people eat, sleep, and breathe soccer. And I can only imagine the pressure that had to have just taken a toll on your confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that part, we talked about how that plays into it, right? Like some of it's, I don't think I play well today. That's one thing. When 50,000 people are telling you didn't play well and the national press is telling you didn't play well, that's when things get exacerbated. And that's when all the pressure starts to get heaped onto your shoulders and you're trying to figure out which way is up. And so that was part of what helped, make me resilient is the fact that I didn't succumb to the pressure, that, I kind of wore it and trudged on and understood that there were going to be times where I was on the back page of the newspaper back, in England, and they were talking bad about me, but I still had to go perform 4 days later and play in a game. So if I let them affect me, then they won.
Yeah. How did you physically keep yourself in the game for so long?
I think kind of how we started the conversation. Sports science to me is fascinating. Once I turned 30 in my early 30s, I think you can get, and to be honest, I think you can get away with being youthful for a while, right? Like the injuries don't plague, they don't feel the same way they do when you're older. And so you don't have to stretch as much. You have to do all those things, and then your body eventually has some miles on it and you have to figure out, how to keep it in the best condition. So when I was around about 31, 32, and I was living in England, I met a brilliant trainer, nutritionist who I kind of swore by as the gospel. And ever since that time, I started focusing on like how my body works and what to put in it and what not to put in it and how to train it so it's at its optimal and it can perform at its best. And so, it became a whole nother sport in itself, right? Like it was going on the field and playing, and there was an expertise to that. And then there was the other side of it, which I became obsessed with. And that was just like, when I get off the field, what am I doing to keep myself prepared, fit, mentally ready, physically ready? And it became its own sport to me. And I was obsessed with it. Still am.
Bailey, are you still vegan?
I am still vegan.
Wow. She became vegan like 3 months ago because she watched like a Netflix
a lot
document.
more than 3 months ago.
Okay. Sorry.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I read some things, watched some things about being vegan, just having a plant-based diet, helping with injuries and recovery. So, I mean, I had nothing to lose at that point. So I've been vegan since, and I feel like my body is just really loving it.
Good. Yeah. I think that the diet part of it is so huge. I'm not vegan. I tried plant-based for a while. It didn't work with my lifestyle and how I was trying to implement it into sport. But irregardless, I learned so many things about it. And I think that, diet is, and you just said it there in terms of helping recover from injury, diet is such an awesome way for athletes to gain an edge. I always think when you get to a certain level of Division I soccer or professional or World Cup, the margins are so fine. Like everybody belongs there, right? Like the people who don't belong there aren't there, right? So everybody who's on the field belongs there. So how do you get that competitive edge? And it may only be 1 or 2%. Maybe you slept more hours the night before. Maybe you have a different diet. So I definitely believe that diet is a game changer.
Just out of curiosity, Tim, what's like the dietary shift maybe you made throughout your career that you found to have the most impact for you? I know you said vegan wasn't working necessarily for your body type, but what did you maybe shift as you focused more on diet?
So I started a paleo diet when I was about 31, high proteins, high fats. And I just think I had, from an uneducated standpoint, I think I'd always bought into like you got to eat a lot of carbs and you're an athlete and you burn a lot of fuel and all that. And it started to learn like where else you can get fuel from. Like there's a lot of fuel components and a lot of them are good and a lot of them are bad. And so, it was just kind of learning that genetics plays a massive part. I'd sit at the training table with my friends and, they're shredded. They don't lift a weight and they're throwing pasta in their mouth. I'm like, I should eat pasta too all the time. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really work for me, And so it was, how can I be lean and trim and sharp and fast and strong? And so that's when I kind of made that shift. But I'm always tweaking, always trying to read and figure out what I can add to my diet, what I can take away.
Awesome. So I kind of want to talk about some of the hard moments in your career, and I know you've done amazing things with Tourette's now, and I just want to kind of open up for you to share your experience having Tourette's and being one of the best goalies in the world.
Yeah. Well, I was around about 10 years old when I was first diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome, which is a neurological disorder, and back then I was a young kid. I was in grade school and, playing soccer with my friends. It was always kind of my outlet because I could be on the field. I didn't have to be all cooped up. I could run around and act crazy and do all the fun things that kids do. And, it was hard at first, especially your teenage years and trying to figure out who you are. And, it's one of those things that's very, very visible. So you can't really hide. You can't just like, throw a hat on it or a jacket over it. It's very visible. And so people take notice. And so I thankfully had a lot of friends growing up who were popular and who appreciated me for me. And so that part was, that part helped me through the really, really tough times, when you question, at 15, you're like, am I gonna be able to drive a car or date a girl, or like all these things that sound crazy, but at the time to a 15-year-old, those are like big things, And so, as I moved into the professional sports realm, soccer again was my outlet, but it was also something I was gifted at. So you had this thing where people were like, well, here's Tourette syndrome, and it could be looked upon as a bad thing, which I don't look upon as a bad thing. And then I had soccer, which I always was ahead of the curve. I played up, ages, and I was able to compete with kids who were older, and I was able to succeed. And so that was always a special thing in my life. And then once I got to the professional ranks, and I was able to speak out more and be more confident again because I had experience, right? Like, if I stunk at soccer, I probably wouldn't speak out so much, but I had these cool experiences with soccer. I was a pretty good player, and so I felt like I could continue to be a voice for for advocating for people with Tourette syndrome. And then I kind of found that voice over the course of my career, and realized that there are going to be times like myself when I was a young kid, I couldn't speak about it. I didn't want to talk about it, and I wanted to kind of hide it, and almost ashamed of it, where I got to the point where I was able to be a voice for the voiceless. And I would continue to do that until they have enough power, to stand on their own 2 feet and advocate for themselves, and, accept who they are.
Hey Tim, I appreciate you sharing that. I guess I'm also curious if you can just try to explain to maybe someone that hasn't been around someone with Tourette's what it looks like and how it manifests itself in someone. Cause I think there's some misconceptions amongst like the public as to like what it is. I think that just as I learned growing up, and I think it's juvenile now, just like somebody uncontrollably cursing.
Sure.
That's not necessarily because as I did come into contact with someone that had it throughout my life, and it's not just like that. So just for someone that might not know and they think it is that kind of stereotypical blurting something out uncontrollably, what did it manifest itself, or how did it in your life? And how can someone that doesn't have it maybe recognize it and be able to, help those or be an advocate that doesn't make them feel uncomfortable if and when it comes up?
Well, the interesting part is how it manifests itself. Is so why Tourette syndrome is so intriguing is because there is no 2 cases that are exactly alike, and so it would ultimately be defined as involuntary tics or movements, which are classified as twitches or tics. Where I think you see Hollywood has done, the Tourette's community a disservice is that they do, glorify it in terms of uncontrollably cursing and that type of thing, which is unfortunately a small percentage of our population. About 4% of people diagnosed with TS have that condition. So that is part of it, and it has been made, people have made light of it. So that's where I think most people would recognize what it is. But yeah, it's involuntary movements, and again, it will change over the course of time. For if you're diagnosed at 10 years old, your tics will change as you get older, just because of you go through puberty and there's chemical changes in your body, and so for me, those have changed all throughout my career. My life really. Yeah. And certainly as I've gotten older, they've kind of not leveled off that they've stopped, but leveled up that the consistency has stayed for a longer period of time.
Yeah. I think that I just want to kind of go back a little. Like I have really big scars on my legs, like very big scars. And my freshman year, when I first had my surgery, I was just so embarrassed. Kind of the same thing like you said. It's just something that I almost felt like I needed to be ashamed of. So I respect you on a whole different level than soccer now, just hearing you talk about how you went from this experience of wanting to hide it to realizing that you sharing your voice could give voice to other people, because not that Stronger Scars is anywhere of a big point of that yet, but I just think that, sometimes it's hard, and I put myself out there because I'm afraid, I want to help other people, because I think a lot of people are feeling the same way I am and are just afraid to speak up. So sometimes I open my mouth too much, but I think that sometimes someone has to be that voice. So I just appreciate you sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Our scars are a story, and I think it takes a lot of maturity to start to understand that. And I think it's probably normal, like you said, to try and hide that at first. It's uncomfortable. Then eventually it becomes somehow, some way it becomes our power. It becomes our strength.
So, okay. less negativity. What was the single-handedly best moment in your career?
Ooh, well, when I get asked that question, I always say I'm lucky because I have a lot of them. I think representing my country. Um, hearing the national anthem, being in a foreign country and hearing the national anthem, it's just such a powerful thing right before the whistle blows, and it's all this emotion. Yeah, and again, I've been lucky. I represented my country 121 times, and so you asked for one, and I gave you 121. But I think every time I was able to pull on the national team shirt was a singular moment for me. I never ever took it for granted. I never pulled the shirt on and didn't feel the badge over my heart. It was always there, And so again, there's certain games, World Cup games. Belgium was one that stands out for a lot of people, and certainly as my career is finished, I look at that game and think that was pretty awesome. It was almost an out-of-body experience, but it was me, so that was pretty cool. And the fact that it happened in the U.S. shirt makes it even more special.
I watched those highlights the other day, and I remember watching that game live, and I think everyone was caught up in it. And then going back, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, it could have been 8-0. What was going on? How did he keep us in this?" So
I've never rewatched it, which is crazy. So that's awesome. One of these days I will.
Yeah, it's out there. What's that? Yeah, I don't know. I'd watch it every day if I were you.
It's funny. I can't remember the last time I rewatched the game I played in. I don't know. I don't like the sound of my own voice. I don't like to watch myself play. It's just something it's kind of something I've never done, but maybe I will one of these days.
That's funny. I would just expect it's like something always playing.
I have it on loop in my office.
Tony, you can take this out, but I'm just curious. So I grew up knowing Landon Donovan's manager really well. Mm-hmm. And I have to show you this picture of me with him. Right now, you're going to laugh.
I'm sure. That's awesome. I like pictures.
Oh, look at that.
Wow. That's amazing.
Well, he was a good guy, right? Did you guys get along?
He's awesome.
Yeah. That was just a side note I had to share. Okay, so I know you have a daughter who plays soccer and is aspiring, to get to that next level. Mm-hmm. So I'm just kind of curious, what advice do you give to her? Like, what are some of the things that, you preach through your practice?
Mm-hmm. I drive her to be the best she can be, and I make sure that she understands that she has to do it for herself. That I've accomplished all of my soccer dreams. That anything she does isn't for me or her mother, but it's for her. That's first and foremost. But I to be honest, I believe in making mistakes. I believe that you got to get knocked down in order to get back up and be more successful. I think in order to succeed, you have to fail a bunch of times, and I think that's scary. And so more than anything, I'm always harping on her to face her fears, and I think that the soccer will take care of itself. She'll do enough, you have to train a lot. You have to get a lot of touches on the ball in order to be a successful soccer player. That doesn't happen overnight. That doesn't happen after a conversation with dad. That happens after years. But more than anything, it's every time she feels fearful, I help her, and I try and, let her know she needs to embrace that fear, not run from it, because in order to get where she's going, there's going to be a lot of moments where you're scared to death, and I think that's healthy. But I also think it's healthy to face them head on. So yeah, that's what I try and challenge her to do.
Do you think it's hard for her, just, having everyone know who her dad is, and just, in the soccer world? Do you think that's a challenge, or do you think that's an advantage?
I don't know. I probably have to ask her. I think she again, she wears it pretty well. She's also a very talented basketball player, and her mom is a former Division I basketball player. So I let her know she's got her work cut out for her, but I think she's the type of kid who rises to that challenge. She's not afraid of that, of the challenge of who her mom is or who I am to the soccer world. She doesn't seem to be daunted by that or phased. I think she kind of wants to carve that out for herself. So, hopefully, again, and because of that, I try and stay in the background. I don't really ever try and be too front facing with her and her teams, and I'm just a dad. I'm just a fan. I cheer for them all. So I try not to put that much pressure on her.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you guys ever need a tour, just let me know of Notre
I
Dame.
will, we will let you know. We'll be there for sure.
We would love to have her.
I can't
Great
wait.
tours.
Good.
I think my final question on the topic of injuries, I'm just, talking to someone like myself, what advice would you give someone who's been through hell and back with injuries?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to see someone who's been through so much and seen so much. What would be those words of advice that you give someone?
Well, I think an injury feels like a loss, doesn't it? Right? It stings, and you feel like you can't get out from under it. And what I would say in regards to the injuries, because I would say it in the same thing as a loss, like, how do you win? I think you win by continuing to keep your head down and persevere with the fear of knowing that losing is still around the corner, right? And it makes you feel vulnerable, and you have to put yourself out there. But at the end of the day, that's the only way to win. Now, what I would say is that you can do all the right things and plan on winning and still lose, right? And so, but that shouldn't deter you from the fact that you still need to put those plans in place and still need to chase it with reckless abandon and, trust in. For me, it was always trusting in my rehab, knowing that the rehab will make me stronger. That of course I'm playing a sport that lends itself to success and to injury as well. And so, again, that's a feeling of vulnerability, but doing all the right things to feel like you're strong enough to get back out there ultimately is the goal.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'll jump in here. So Tim, I'd be remiss if we didn't touch this topic here.
Sure.
We're recording on June 4th. So the last 7 to 10 days, there's been a lot going on in this country. There's been a lot of unrest. And I looked up an article from The Athletic that was a profile of you from, I think, a couple years ago. And it was a great profile, but it detailed one of the tattoos you have that says boycott racism.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to read the quote and then get kind of your thoughts in the last couple of days and just in general this topic. But you said racism sucks, but it's alive and well. Mm-hmm. I think what happens, and certainly throughout my life, it's like the pink elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, but it's real and we should talk about it. So Bailey's great. She's got a great platform and we talk about all kinds of things. And I think this is the topic that's rightfully dominating the conversation right now nationally. So just what have your reactions been? What have your emotions been like the last week or so? And how can we, I think, live out that virtue you're talking about talking about racism and bringing an end to it?
Yeah, gosh, a lot of meat on that bone. I think that, we're right in the thick of it. Here we are. It seems as if our country is under siege, really. It seems like it's upside down. But in a way, it's like through any bad times, I think through struggle becomes triumph. And I think what you're seeing in our country is an awakening, is, as I said in that piece there, racism, even when I said it a couple of years ago, it's alive and well and nobody wanted to talk about it. Well, the good thing is now everyone's talking about it. And I think what needs to happen is we need to continue to talk about it with a compassionate heart, with a lot of energy. And I think that more than anything, this conversation of race in our country, because our country has the roots that it does, it seems to ebb and flow. It seems to have these highs and these lows and these highs and these lows. And then when it's low, everyone says things are back to normal, everything's fine. Really, it's never going to be fine until it continues to stay at the forefront of the conversation and real drastic changes made systemically. And so, look, I think that having the conversations that we're having, and the conversation could be in the form of a debate, it could be in the form of a protest. It can, conversations happen all different ways. And in the world in which we live, they're going to happen, whether it be through social media, through a megaphone, through a march. It's going to happen in vastly different ways. And I think that we need to continue to talk about them and feel safe and feel like we have the platform to talk about it. Real change is needed. Leadership is needed everywhere. I think what our country has lost overall, like people think when I say leadership, we're talking about the president. He's one of the many, but leadership is everywhere. I don't know if this generation has a Mahatma Gandhi or a Mother Teresa or Nelson Mandela or Malcolm X or Martin Luther King or the list goes on and on. Those were real leaders, and none of them were president of the United States, right? And so there still needs to be leadership in our police departments, leadership in our local governments, and until those conversations are really at the forefront, not having them for political gain, but actually having them, for the advancement of the human race, then the conversation can't stop. The great thing about what I think is happening right now as we sit here is that people seem energized more than anything, more than any time probably in my lifetime. People seem energized about it. It's not just a slogan. It's not just something people are saying, but they really seem to be passionate about the conversation.
Let me ask you just a follow up. I appreciate you sharing that. I think not necessarily looking to the highest level and leading at even the grassroots level. I think about soccer having a very complicated history with race. And I see discussions, whether it be on different news outlets or social media or broadcasts about, fixing the racism at those big, high club levels. But as everyone's talked about, I think you're right. It's the forefront now. It's a learned behavior. I imagine soccer fans played youth soccer at some point. And learned these bad behaviors. So and you have a young children that play soccer, a young girl you just talked about. What have you seen, or how can we just start local? We always talk about youth soccer in the US growing the game, but how do we start to weed out that kind of thinking that can then permeate itself into life when they are adults and might be people in those stadiums? How do you lead at that level? Because that to me is something that somebody can listen to this. They might coach their 10-year-old soccer team and they can make that change. They can't change the fan policies in the Premier League, but they can make that change. So I'm just curious if you have any ideas of how you can start there to feel like you have an impact.
Well, listen, I think that it's probably even a much deeper conversation than that, because I think in America, youth soccer has not been all inclusive. The soccer globally is all inclusive, right? We speak different languages with different races. People, in the Premier League, I play with guys from all corners of the globe. In America, unfortunately, our youth soccer system is a pay-to-play system, and I know people have debated that for years and years. But we certainly are not all-inclusive in American youth soccer. And I think what we can do more than anything, as a starting point, I think is if at the top level that's not going to change today, then I think what we can do in our individual youth clubs around each state is be more inclusive, is give scholarships, so to speak, to children, from that local area, whether it be Memphis, where I live in Memphis, allowing some kids from underprivileged communities to come in and play for the top teams in our local communities. And that's a starting point, because I think as you talk about power and leadership, we as directors of soccer clubs in our local communities, or coaches of soccer clubs, or directors of coaching, we have that power. We can make those overarching decisions that can change the landscape of what that looks like for our kids.
That's interesting. I've never even thought of it like that, because you're right. Like it's a pay to play, and it's just not fair at the end of the day.
It's difficult in this country. We haven't quite figured it out yet. It's such a big country, and there's so many different ideas on how soccer should be organized and orchestrated that it's hard to tell the guy in Seattle and the guy in Miami, Florida, who both run youth teams, how to do it. So it's a challenge.
I appreciate you sharing that. It's a difficult topic on race right now, and this Notre Dame soccer team, we've actually have met a couple of times about it, and just have all shared our thoughts, and we're excited to put out a statement and just kind of, like you said, this is the first really big movement in our time that we've seen, and we're all trying to educate ourselves and just be supportive. And I think that being the first time that this has really been, obviously we haven't seen anything like this in our lifetime, and I think a lot of us are just excited to help and support and share our voices. So I was actually talking to my teammates. I was like, who's somebody I could have on the podcast to talk about this? So I'm excited we brought it up in this, just because, I think any platform we have that we can talk about things, these hard conversations, we should open the door to them and just kind of talk about them. So I appreciate you opening up and talking about that.
I'm glad. Thank you. I'm glad you guys, you ladies had the conversation. We did with our team as well. And I thought it's incredibly important to share a safe and healthy space to talk about this. You know, and I think I think that's encouraging that you all are doing that, because look, as far as I'm concerned, and no one ever will tell me differently, that as long as, I don't care what color you are, as long as you come at this conversation with a compassionate and empathetic heart, you can't have a wrong conversation. There's a lot of ways to do the right thing. And I think that that's what we're finding out now. And so I would continue to encourage you to have those dialogues, because they're important, and they don't stop. There's no start point and end point. Well, there could be a start point, but there's certainly no end point. They need to continue.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's awesome. What do you got?
Do you have any questions for me?
Oh, any questions for Bailey? That's my favorite part.
Wow, that's a good one. I probably have loads. Okay, biggest question: how far are you out from your last surgery?
So my last one was my sophomore year for Easter break. So we're quite some time out. So I rehabbed through my junior season about 3/4 the way, I want to say I missed. So I got to, and you know, it's hard when you come back from an injury. I don't give myself enough credit. I think I'm very hard on myself, and I still want to be at that high level, and I want to still be competing for a starting spot when, you know, having my legs gone through so much that they've gone through, it's sometimes a conversation I need to be realistic with myself. So, you know, senior season, I'm hoping that I can get back in shape and get the legs ready to play. But yeah, it's been a while, but we'll see what the future holds.
Oh, well, that's exciting. That's really exciting. So my fingers are crossed for the 2020 season to get up and running. That's awesome. That's exciting.
We'll make sure to send you a link to the broadcast when she makes her next start.
Yeah, listen, I'll be watching. You don't have to. I'll be following the whole time. Don't worry.
That'd be awesome.
I'm excited for you guys.
That's all I got. Bailey, you got anything else?
I don't think so.
Tim, I can't thank you enough, man. I mean, Bailey's done amazing work. She's talked to, I think now this is like episode 40.
Wow.
But to get someone else, I'll speak on her behalf. I'm sure she will love this, but to get someone of your stature to come and talk about the wide range of topics you talked about today is super helpful for her. It shows that, you know, what she's doing is making a difference. And just to hear I think the word you heard said the most today was compassion. I think it rings true right now more than ever, as we talked about, but that's what this platform has been. It's been a really compassionate space. And so for you to come in and be the same way is, you know, I appreciate it. And I know Bailey does. So.
Tony, thank you. Yeah, Bailey, you're a rock star. I mean, this is fun. This was fun for me. And obviously I'm happy to champion the cause, and you know, you're doing really great things. So keep it going. I'll be following you.
Thank you.